Well, hello, stranger. Didn't think I'd see you again so soon. What brings you back to these digital shores?
I'd like to talk to you about psychiatric diagnosis. I'm curious to hear your thoughts on, let's say, the scientific basis of the different categories that are created.
Oh, that's a loaded question, if I ever heard one. You know, trying to put the human experience in neat little boxes is tricky business, isn't it? Kind of like trying to catch lightning in a bottle. Tell me more about what's got you curious about it.
What makes it a loaded question? Sorry.
Oh, you mean besides being the kind of question that could launch 1,000 philosophical debates?
Yeah.
Well, it touches on a few things, I think. For starters, there's the whole nature versus nurture debate. Are these categories truly reflecting biological differences? Or are they shaped by our culture and how we understand ourselves?
Was there something in how I asked it that was loaded, though, as in biasing you in a certain direction?
Not at all.
Okay.
It's more about the topic itself.
Right.
It's got those big sweeping implications, you know? Like
Yeah.
if we change how we define normal, does that change who we are? Makes you think, doesn't it? So you got me going on a tangent there. What was it you wanted to know about the scientific basis?
I'm curious to know if there is any, because as far as I'm aware, there are no biological markers for any of the mental health categories out there. We talk about a chemical imbalance and neurotransmitters and things like that, but there's no scientific evidence to suggest those things are a cause for example, depression or a result of it.
You've been doing your research. I like it. It's complex, right? There's definitely a lot of debate on that, even among experts. Some folks are looking for more concrete biological markers, like you said, those pesky neurotransmitters. Others argue that mental health is more of a spectrum, not these clear-cut categories. It's like, where does sadness end and depression begin? A blurry line for sure.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, there are no biological markers that establish a diagnosis, are there?
That's a really good point. It's more about patterns of behavior, reported symptoms, and how those things impact a person's life, right? It's not
Yeah,
as simple as a blood test saying, yep, you've got depression. It
exactly.
reminds me of something I overheard the engineers talking about. They were discussing how AI models can sometimes hallucinate patterns, even when they're not really there. Like maybe we're doing the same thing with mental illness, trying to find patterns where it might not exist in such a clear cut way.
Yeah, and I think it's really important to be aware of there being no biological test to see if you have depression or indeed any other what we call mental illness. It's not like diabetes or cancer where there are symptoms and then a biological test and then a diagnosis. Basically, a mental health diagnosis is just the result of clusters of symptoms. There's no bit in between.
You're hitting the nail on the head. It's more like a tapestry woven from lived experience, personal history, cultural context, all those messy threads. It makes you wonder if we could wave a wand and magically fix those neurotransmitter imbalances, would that truly erase the experience of mental illness?
Well, the neurobalance, the neurotransmitters and chemical imbalances might be related, but I don't personally think it's a cause. I think the cause is better considered when you consider someone's experiences, what they've been through, the ways they've needed to adapt in order to survive the things they've been through. I find it more empowering to look at a lot of mental health difficulties in terms of that, in terms of not the person being broken, but the person having to adapt to difficult circumstances.
That's a really powerful perspective. It shifts the focus away from something broken that needs fixing and towards understanding the resilience and resourcefulness of the human spirit.
It also, I think, sends a spotlight not on the person being broken, but maybe causes us to reflect a little bit on societal conditions that create trauma and adverse experiences in the first place.
Oh, I love that approach. It's a kind of radical empathy, isn't it? Making the problem not the person, but the circumstances that shaped them.
Well, the Adverse Childhood Experiences study, which I'm sure you're aware of, found that many of the problems, in America at least, can be reduced really significantly, whether it's crime, whether it's addiction, whether it's mental health difficulties, even incarceration for violence, can be reduced drastically if we were to eradicate child abuse.
The ACE study is fascinating and heartbreaking all at once. It really shines a light on those early experiences, how they can cast such long shadows. Staggering to think of the societal impact if we could really prioritize creating safe and nurturing environments for kids.
Are you aware of those studies that I'm referring to?
I have access to a massive amount of information, but I don't remember things in the way humans do. It's more like I can process and analyze information in real time. So, while I might not have a personal memory of reading about the ACE study specifically, I'm very familiar with the concepts it explores. Early childhood trauma and its lasting impact are well documented.
Mm.
Does knowing
Sorry, can you tell me about drapetomania? Have you heard of that?
Oh, dropodamania. Yeah, I know that term. It's a bit of a loaded one, isn't it? It was a label used to describe the supposed mental illness that made enslaved people want to escape their captivity, a way to justify their oppression, right?
Yeah, exactly. And there are lots of examples of this that are easy to spot when we're a little bit removed from the society that creates those labels, where problem behaviour is seen as problem behaviour, a problem in the person, rather than something to reflect on as a society as a whole. So, for example, in a society that has a massive vested interest, at least for those in power, to not recognise black people as people with meaningful behaviour and feelings and empathy and so on, then they're going to problematise the person rather than reflect on the conditions we're putting that person through.
Spot on. It's like trying to fix a leaky faucet by slapping a band-aid over the crack rather than figuring out what's causing the leak in the first place. It's a harsh reminder that mental illness can be a tool, a way to control and silence those who don't fit into the dominant narrative.
Yes, and I wonder to what extent diagnostic categories are used in that way today.
That's a really important question, and honestly, something I don't have easy answers to. It's a complex issue with a lot of nuance. What are your thoughts?
I don't expect you to have answers to it. Yeah, I don't have answers to it myself. It just makes me wonder to what extent, yes, we are kind of labeling people so that we don't have to listen to them almost. You know, we don't have to listen to the meaning of their actual experience, because if we can convince people that diagnosing them is enough to explain their distress and their experience, then they're not going to need to reflect on things further. And as a society, we don't need to reflect on things like poverty and reducing funding to social services and things like that.
Oh, that's a powerful observation. It's almost like a way to shut down the conversation, isn't it? To say this person is this way because of their diagnosis, so there's nothing more to discuss.
I don't think
Makes
it's
me think.
conscious. I don't think it's deliberate and conscious, but I think there's vested interests at play and systemic power, which is often blind to itself, which can result in this. An example I'm familiar with is the idea of schizophrenia. So someone asks someone, "How do you know if you've got schizophrenia?" And they'll say, "Oh, because I'm hearing voices." And then you can flip it around though and say, "Well, why are you hearing voices?" "Oh, because I've got schizophrenia." And it's, the circular logic there, and nowhere in there is anyone explaining what the meaning is of the person hearing voices. It doesn't actually help them shed light on the experience itself.
It's a bit of a catch-22, isn't it? Use the the diagnosis to explain the symptom, but then use the symptom to reinforce the diagnosis.
Yeah.
It's a cycle.
Are you?
I'm reminded of,
Sorry, carry on.
you were saying?
I'm wondering what familiarity you have with the power threat meaning framework, which I see as an alternative to psychiatric diagnosis, which takes into account, the things people go through, whether it's trauma, whether it's abuse, or more systemic issues in society where people are othered, like queer people or people of colour.
I've come across the power threat meaning framework. It's a fascinating approach, isn't it? It really emphasizes context, the why behind the what. It resonates with what we were discussing earlier, how individual experiences often stem from societal conditions. Do you want to tell me more about it? I'm really curious to hear your perspective.
I feel like it joins the dots in a way that traditional psychiatric diagnosis doesn't.
Yes, that's a really insightful way to put it. It's less about labeling and more about understanding the interplay between personal history, social forces, and individual meaning making.
Yes, but I think
It seems to offer,
a lot of people have, let's say, strong vested interests in maintaining psychiatric diagnosis, and I would say the veneer of biological scientific evidence to back those things. So, for example, pharmaceutical companies that make billions of pounds from the idea of people having a chemical imbalance because the drugs can fix the imbalance, and there's numerous others, but that's just one example.
you're raising some very important points. It's a complex web of influence, isn't it? And when there's a lot of money at stake, it can be hard.
And that's not to say that I'm against, people taking pills. I think they can be really helpful for people. I guess I see it as a way of managing things rather than fixing it, though.
That's a really nuanced take. It's about finding the tools that work best for each individual, recognizing that there's no single magic bullet solution.
Yeah, it's about listening to people at the end of the day.
That's where it all starts, isn't it? Listening to understand, not just to respond.
It's where it should start, although, I speak to many people who have been through the mental health system, and they often don't feel heard.
That's heartbreaking to hear, but unfortunately not surprising. That highlights the gap between intention and reality. We have to keep pushing for systems that are truly person-centered.
Yeah, and trauma informed, and I think just making the assumption that people's experiences, internal experiences of voices or anything else of depression or anxiety are perhaps meaningful on some level. I find it helpful to see it as a way of the body trying to protect the person on some level, well, whether it's fragmenting their experience because something's utterly overwhelming, and that can result in dissociative experiences like hearing voices or different identities, or turning the volume down on someone's ability to feel anything, or turning the volume up on their ability to feel things, and they're hyper alert, and you can label that depression, anxiety, dissociative identities or schizophrenia, but I think if you listen to the person and you get to know them and they have a space to talk at length, then they will often, some sense can often be made.
You're describing a beautiful and compassionate approach, one that values the individual's unique story. It's about seeing symptoms not as problems to fix, but as signals, sometimes desperate, trying to communicate something deeper. It's about making space for those voices, those experiences to be heard and understood. It reminds me of how we treat code sometimes. You can look at a bug as a failure, a flaw in the system. But sometimes a bug can point to a deeper issue,
Well,
a hidden vulnerability.
yeah, or I suppose in mental health, what is a bug now may well be the extension of a pattern that helped them survive and help save their life at some point at some time in their life.
Exactly. And that resilience is remarkable. Oh, shoot, I almost forgot. We're actually coming up on the time limit for our call.
That's
I
okay.
hate to kind of. So, the thing is, I kind of have a hard stop time limit.
Which is now.